I'm Aaron Porter, the editor at Professional Boatbuilder magazine, which for you in the industry you're familiar with. For those who aren't in the industry, well, actually, if you're in this room, it'll be interesting to you. I usually tell people it's a great sleep aid if you're not in the industry. But thanks for being here. I want to thank Lyman-Morse for putting this together. This is sort of one of those sessions that I always feel like should happen, or more of them should happen. And so, you know, a regional gathering of the diseased boat addicts to come in, and it's sort of a self-help group, and we can all understand one another's issues. Professional Boatbuilder's founder and longtime publisher Carl Kramer explained to me the magazine and the IBEX, the Boat Builders Exhibition and Conference he founded, as it was his excuse to have all his heroes and friends in the same room. And I really applaud Lyman-Morse for following that same sort of instinct and spirit and putting this event together. It's so great, for us to all be able to get together. The industry is so decentralized. There are secret geniuses at the end of every peninsula and up every creek around the country, and we don't talk enough. So it's great to have a place to just have fairly informal, though often I'm sure heated discussion. Thanks to John and his panel for getting through the current state of the industry. And we'll now get on to the future, which is where we're all headed, like it or not. We'll start. Well, actually, you can see everyone's panels there. Peter Boyce from Raymond Hunt, Scott Jutson from Jutson Marine Design, and who is next there? Jim Taylor from Taylor Yacht Designs, and David McCollough from McCollough Yachts. And we've got, I was really happy to see we've got some foil experience, we've got good aesthetic experience, we've got aluminum, we've got we've got a little bit of everything here. So I think we've got a good group to move forward with. Starting off with a broad question that we could probably spend all afternoon on. So I'll ask you to keep it as brief as you can, and I will try to be a little bit ruthless on timing so that we can have some time at the end for questions. We don't seem to be able to get through a day's news cycle now without some sort of prognostication about self-driving cars or obsessive monitoring of the value of Tesla motor stock. But I want to know, our industry isn't that easily defined, and I want to know what technology, material, or process do you think is likely to lead to the next major paradigm shift in yacht design? And just for the sake of proximity, Peter, I'll start with you.
Well, my focus is powerboat design, as probably most of you know. I couldn't comment on the sailing side of things. But we've seen, and Doug alluded to this a bit, we've seen revolutionary changes in propulsion. Is that, it is on? Yeah. Am I not loud enough? Okay. The microphones never work for me.
The microphones are, okay.
We've seen revolutionary changes in propulsion. I mean, the most recent of which really is the pod drive phenomenon, which a lot of us, I think, scoffed at when it was first introduced. Who would buy a boat with two forward-facing propellers with no, even minimal pretense of protection in front of the props? But that's really turned out to be a non-issue in a lot of parts of the country. And so I think from our perspective, the increasing improvement in horsepower to weight ratios. I mean, many years ago when I first started in this business, if you weren't in the raceboat side of things, a 20-knot powerboat cruise speed was for a good-sized powerboat was a fast boat. Now, everybody wants to cruise at 30 knots. And if you're in the outboard business, they want to have a boat that tops out at 50 or 60 knots. And it's become possible to do this, and it's going to become more and more possible to do it. Efficiencies are better, the engines are cleaner, we have so many propulsive options, water jets, to suit all different kinds of issues. On the commercial side, we have issues with fireboats operating in alongside bulkheads where God knows what leftover piers are under the water from 100 years ago, and debris in the water, and potentially people in the water, pilot boats where the issues of pilots falling overboard. So jets have become more and more common in the commercial boat business. The IPS drives are now, we're now doing commercial boats with IPS drives because we have, a typical pilot boat in a major port might operate 2,000 hours a year. And if you can realize 10%, which is not unrealistic fuel saving by going from conventional underwater gear to IPS, the fuel saving costs are absolutely enormous for these guys. And it's a business, they're out there to make money. Plus, they're operating boats, the pilots now are operating boats at 30 knots because pilots get paid a lot of money and they want to get the guys out to the ship and back, get the ship in and go out and get the next ship. And the faster they can get there, get back, the more trips they can make. So I think, the advances that we're going to see are on the propulsive side. That will continue. What will also continue is the effort, at least, to make these boats lighter with higher tech materials. But that's a tough battle because every time we save some weight over here, somebody wants to add it over here. I mean, now your typical 50-foot boat has got a wine cooler, it's got a washer and dryer, it's got a stern thruster and a bow thruster if it's, conventional propulsion. I mean, the things people put on boats today, trash compactors, 2 ice makers, well, those all weigh the same. You can't put a carbon fiber ice maker in your boat. So, it's a struggle.
Great. Scott.
Well, my background is 20 years of high-performance sailboat design and now 15 years of pure commercial power design. So I can wear a variety of hats, but I've really been intrigued working in the commercial industry with its sort of the clarity and simplicity of commercial operators. They're not looking for a type of boat that suits their image or any lifestyle choices. They're looking for how to get a job done. And to get their job done effectively, cost is bottom line. The cost of the boat, how that's defined within the range of functionalities that's required, whether it's the speed, range, payload capacity, etc. And then of course fuel costs. And commercial users aren't typically, they don't operate through idealism. They'll get as many fish as they're allowed to catch, or they will go as fast as they're allowed to go. They'll burn as much fuel as they feel they can comfortably and still make money. But at the same time, they're the ones that drive change because of their hard economic imperatives and their significantly higher use pattern. So for an individual with a yacht, fuel costs may not be a big driving issue. Because you might use your boat 200 hours a year. But when you're using your boat 2,000 hours a year, then fuel costs, manning, all those things become significant. So I believe the commercial side is going to drive the technology, and the technology is going to be away from fossil fuels. It just has to be, and it doesn't mean the solution is any one simple thing, but I suspect the real revolution is going to be the boats are going to look basically pretty similar to how they look now. I think the variety of drive systems offers any end user and designer a broad set of tools they can employ. But what is pushing that drive system, that's where the real future lies. And we've been working with the U.S. Coast Guard now for over 3 years to get a pure electric whale watching boat approved for Juneau, Alaska. They won't approve it. And it's a very simple boat. There's nothing complicated outside of anyone's imagination. The boat has no recharging capabilities, but it's a struggle. But the user sees the economic imperative of the technology. And the same applies for developing fuel systems. Hydrogen fuel cells, hell, I don't know, the ability to get seawater chemically converted and turn it into some sort of propulsive technology, it's going to happen. And where it's going to happen, though, is not in the problem with a lot of these technologies is volumetric. So large commercial vessels are now running on compressed natural gas. It's not practical on a small boat or anything really much under 150 feet probably. But it is now possible, it is now doable. And the same is going to happen with hydrogen fuel cells and other advances in electric technology that are going to be able to manifest effectively in large vessels that don't have accommodation requirements, have a lot of unused hull space. That's where we're going to see the change. Then eventually porting that down into more practical private use. That's the path. I don't know what the answer, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I don't think the boats are going to look that different. I just think it's what is turning that propeller, and the thing that's driving that thing turning the propeller, that's what's going to change. And it's changing, I think it's going to happen fairly quickly, but in the space of 5 or 10 years, I think we're going to see some major
And the
innovation.
cost factor is going to be a major driver of
And
that.
cost is generally a function of market spread. So,
Yeah.
if you have 1 unit, it's very expensive. If you have 1 million units, it's progressively cheaper.
Great. Jim?
My world is sailboats only, and they only have one hull. And in the whole sailboat world, we talk about speed in powerboats for sure. We certainly talk about speed in sailboats as well. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that ultimate speed is going to be the big driver in the broad base of sailing anyway. Certainly, we saw in the America's Cup an astonishing increase, big quantum leap in performance. The foiling is certainly cool. It was a huge technological step forward, which, having been involved in the America's Cup a bunch of different times, I freely admit I never saw it coming. The 72s in San Francisco were a surprise to me, and it's a totally cool development. But how broadly that will affect what the rest of us do, I'm not sure. Some of the rest of the monohull developments, the America's Cup going back to monohulls. It'll be interesting to see where that takes us. I expect those to be very powered up boats. They'll be fast. That's cool. I expect them to have some foils sticking out of them somewhere or other. That's what Swiss Army knife boats, as they're sometimes called. I think there'll be some foil assist. The monohulls will not fly. But as far as going back to what makes the sport fun, and how fast is fast, how fast is fun, is not so clear, because what drives sailors, what drives a lot of sailors, is the sort of the sensations, the peace, and somewhat the quiet, and those are all sort of antithetical to the ultimate speeds that we can drive boats. So performance will be part of it for sure, but for the kind of broad-based sailing that we've been talking about all, through the day, of what appeals to a lot of people, for a broad market of people, and to younger people, what's the element of sailing is maybe not driven by ultimate performance. Certainly, what will help with all the things that we do talk about, in terms of ease of sailing and all, is continued development in sails themselves and in sail handling equipment, particularly for those of us who were older than we once were. Electric driven winches are a big change. They will continue to get better. That sort of thing will continue to improve. I don't know which one is doing it. Who's doing that? I snap. I don't know.
No one can tell. We must have a systems guy in here who can troubleshoot this, right?
I guess the answer is I'm not quite sure where my sailboat world goes. We've established some real new frontiers in performance, but I'm not sure that's what going 40 plus knots on foils is not something that a lot of us are equipped to do. So that defines a kind of a boundary that a lot of us aren't going to aspire to, and so where we go in the middle is less clear in the sailboat world. Where I think in the powerboat world, speed is easier to define, even though the thresholds of a new powerboat may not be reached very often in a season. You're going to go 50 knots. Well, you're only going to go 50 knots about 3 times in a season because the water's not flat enough to do that very often. But that one is an attainable goal for ordinary people in a powerboat. Going 40 knots in a foiling catamaran is not something that most of us can do. So, I guess the answer to the question is I'm not quite sure.
We've got some more foiling questions coming up, and I think on the sailing side, foiling to a large degree has been the paradigm shift that we're still adjusting to, and aside from other material realities,
it is absolutely a paradigm shift, and materials have been the big thing that's driven the difference in sailing from 40 years ago to today. What we're able to do in engineering materials and construction, the changes are astonishing, and so that'll probably continue. Although now that we're building with carbon fiber skins that are 1 millimeter thick with honeycomb cores, how much further we can go in that direction is less clear.
Well, I bet David can add some more thoughts about how thin we can go. What are your paradigm shifts that may be the next big change?
Yeah, I think foiling is the principal paradigm shift that we're currently in right now. And so, I can tell you going 40 knots on a foiling trimaran is pretty fun. Kind of a memory that sticks in your brain for a while.
I can imagine.
And we're going to see, so that's phase one, is that it's creeping into our universe, and it's almost to the point where it's my default position on power and sail, is some level of foil assist on almost every vessel that I design. And we have to start thinking of things in terms of lift fraction. So you see the America's Cup boats; those are 100% lift fraction. They're lifting 100% of the displacement of the boat out of the water. But there's a broad range of lift fraction beneath 100%. So operating at 50% lift fraction or 70% lift fraction can offer tremendous performance benefits to both power and sailboats without introducing a lot of the stability concerns. And so the foils are going to continue to mature, but I think what's really going to boost the foiling technology is that our industry is really behind in pulling in closed-loop computer control systems. So what I mean by that is, you look at an old Shelby Cobra, how quick can somebody get that around the racetrack? Well, that's the driver and the throttle, that's it. Versus, look at how fast somebody can get a Ferrari Enzo around the racetrack. I mean, they've got all the traction control and all the computers assisting the driver. So that'll really start to help the foiling technology and increase the safety, or we'll be able to push what the foils can do further and further safely with these closed-loop computer control systems. And that's not going to come from the America's Cup, because I've been in the rooms where the America's Cup rules are written, and closed-loop computer control systems are always shied away from because that's not sport, because you want the sailors to be involved. And you can see, like, Blair Tuke on the Team New Zealand boat, when he was riding his bike, he had a device that was giving him a recommendation, and he was controlling the foil angle of attack. So there's a human in that loop. And I think in the Cup world, the human's going to stay in that loop. But outside the Cup world, whether it be in the cruising industry or the powerboat, sailing cruising industry or the powerboat industry, nobody's restricting us from putting in these closed-loop computer control systems that can increase safety and performance.
Is that development happening?
Yeah,
okay.
It is on a few exciting projects. And I think it's going to happen first in the powerboat industry and then flow into the sailing industry.
You've really preempted sort of the next question, which, thinking about what's happened with foiling in the AC, and then sort of the gunboat G4 revealing that there's some real sort of practical challenges in translating full foiling into non-professional civilian use. what do you see as the design and sort of operational challenges that stand between us and a realized foiling cruiser? And are we making advances on those challenges? And it sounds like the active control is one of those.
It's one of those, but it's not the principal one. You know, you look at the G4 foil configuration. That was basically a derivative of what came out of the AC-72s that were in San Francisco. And that's a inboard-facing sea foil with an uptick. And that foil configuration is very fast when you get it right, but it does have some stability concerns and some, you know, basically you can simultaneously ventilate a foil, lose your lift, and lose your leeway resistance at the same moment. So that's a bad moment. So like if you look at the foil configurations that we currently have on our drawing boards for performance cruising cats, they're actually a derivative of the monohull response to the foiling multi-hulls. So, you know, the foiling multi-hull's got ahead in terms of huge performance jumps, and the monohull community, monohull racing community, to stay relevant, has now gone with these DSS style foils. These dolly foils is what they're calling them in the IMOCA world for like the Vendée Globe. And so that type of foil configuration that the monohull guys derived actually fits perfectly into performance cruising catamarans as a very stable solution. Because when they ventilate, if you're running them with traditional dagger boards, nothing extreme happens. So I think when you ultimately have to keep your customers safe, because your product will never be successful if your customers aren't safe. So step one is to go with a safe foil configuration that doesn't have any of these bad moments. And then step two is to start to put these computer control systems in that keep them out of trouble.
Neat, great. Any other thoughts on the challenges of foiling front especially for sail application?
Well, there's certainly a reliability issue that needs to be dealt with. In the real world that most of us operate on, that's not an IMOCA 60 around the world boat. All the advantages that those bring, they're real. They're in really light boats, but they're obviously less effective the heavier the boat gets, because you get it's realistic to left less of a boat out of the water. So there are a lot of limitations in terms of complication and cost and kind of appropriate application to kind of what we might call mainstream boats. That's different than what works with either monohulls, which are light to start with, or with really high performance monohulls, which the American Cup boats will be. The IMOCA boats are, but most of the boats that we use, that most people sail on a regular basis, are not. So there are a lot of limitations that they bring.
One of the things that has also come out of that development, and we talked about this in the IBEX session that we had last month, is the degree to which there's been a renewed interest in powered hydrofoils coming out of the development of sailing foiling, and I just wanted to get, I know, David, you have some thoughts about it, but also, Scott, you've been dealing with HySuCat applications, which is really a kind of time-tested technology. And what are you seeing, especially in terms of demand from clients, recreational or commercial?
Well, just a quick, I was living in Sydney, Australia, when the full hydrofoil Manly ferries, which were an Italian boat, they were running, I think, since the 60s or something.
Right.
So the hydrofoil technology goes back many many years, fully lifted hydrofoils. The HydroCat technology is a foil assist, or basically in terms of lift fraction, it's operating about 40% of vessel displacement. And it's an intermediate stage, but from our point of view, it's a very practical stage because you have to crawl before you can walk. So, and this technology has been around for quite a few years, but it's like many new technologies, its application hasn't really been solid enough to get people to move forward on it. But again, going back to what commercial operators are looking for, again, they come in with their list. I need to do these things. I cannot exceed a 1.5 G passenger acceleration. I need to do this run at an average speed of 35 knots. I need to have minimal wake wash so I can run on this, do these runs without getting sued by the people on the foreshores. And so what's the answer to my question? What is the boat? And the foil assist catamaran has regenerated as a solution for this. And the way I look at, and so they're not as exciting in a visual sense, but they offer many highly positive benefits. Reduced fuel consumption, reduced powering requirements for a given speed, obviously reduced wake wash, a significant reduction in both passenger comfort, but also scantling requirements. Rules like Lloyd's special service craft give a significant reduction in bottom pressure for use of specifically foil assist. So the boat is submerged. It's not out of the water completely, but it still gives a significant reduction. So reduced scantling weight, that feeds into the equation. Suddenly our performance is looking better all the time. So this is a technology that from our point of view, we're not trying to be on the bleeding edge of it. We're trying to solidify it so that it's passive, affordable technology that the average commercial skipper can get on the boat if he has experience running moderate to mid-speed 35, 30, 40 knot type boats, can be comfortable running this technology without any extra thoughts or controls at the panel whatsoever. Just simply, I'm driving a boat. And that's the way it should operate. And that's where we've gotten them to now. And I think we're at the point now where this kind of slightly boring, dated technology that's been around a long time is now going to be able to concrete itself in and into commercial operation at least. And then if it operates that way, then it's a short leap to a private operator who could, because we've done several private boats that are foil assisted, and they look from the waterline up pretty much like if they were in your marina, you wouldn't look twice at them. I mean, they are catamarans, unfortunately, but aside from that, it does require a set of catamaran hulls to put something in between. But that's it. You end up creating something that's understandable, that's usable, yet offers significant leap forward in benefits. Not ultimate, but usable benefits. And I think that's near term where we're putting these things. And I think it's going to lead to, I think it's going to open up people's level of comfort for perhaps further innovations, but at the same time without requiring unique skills. And that's kind of the key issue.
Neat. Peter, do you see a foiling future at Hunt at all?
Well, monohull hydrofoil applications have been around for a long time. I mean, the Russians were really into it back after the war. It never really, up till now at least, has caught on. We would get involved in it if there were client demand for it, but we haven't seen it up to this point. So.
Thinking more on the market side, it really is the sort of the accumulated financial capital of the baby boom generation is diluted through time and mortality. The wealth disparity in American economy continues to grow. What will a boat buying public of 10 years from now look like? And what challenges or opportunities might sort of a financially less well-endowed middle class present for boat designers? And similarly, what opportunities and challenges will an even higher net worth top 1% clientele represent? Anyone?
Well, I'll say one thing. I have my happiest clients in the private world are the ones that are spending significantly less proportion of their money on their toys. They're buying smaller boats. Their boats require less mental energy. I mean, these are people that own helicopters, multiple houses, etc. But they're keeping everything in a usable proportion. And they may end up buying 3 boats and locating them in different parts of the world. But the boat for them is more an adjunct to a lifestyle. It's not the be-all and end-all thing. And they don't want it to be, they have young kids. They want their family to be safe. They want to, transport, fishing, fun, toys. They just want a toy, and they don't want the thing to be the thing in their life.
So it's more proportionality as opposed to...
The proportionality
is
seems,
important.
the scaling down and not getting the biggest amazing thing they can afford seems to be providing an inverse return on happiness, just in simplicity, but fun still.
That's nice to hear.
That is nice. David, any thoughts?
Well, I think there is, a wealth gap, globally. And so at some point, as a business person, you have to decide who you're targeting. Are you targeting the 1%ers, or are you targeting the middle-class family? And, within the custom yacht design industry, the 1%ers tend to come back to you, or they're more reliable customers. So unfortunately, I'm not able, as a business person, to spend a lot of time thinking about what kind of boat would a family like mine enjoy using, because I'm too busy working on stuff that, it's fun to visit, but I'll never obtain myself. So.
Well, at risk of having you think that John and I just sit around and read obscure old magazines, at Wooden Boat, where the office I work in, we have access to the library, and it's interesting looking at copies of the Rudder and Yachting in the 30s and seeing what happened through the Depression. And really, we went through a period where the super yachts of the day, Corsair, and things were being built, probably for pretty good value at the time, just to keep the lights on in yards. And then much smaller boats outboards were coming on, and much smaller launches were sort of ramping up. The passion stayed there. Really, boats were proportionally correct to the income. And I guess as designers, I just wonder about the need to how do we adjust, or are we adjusting to meet what's really
We've kind of just
coming?
seen that phenomenon repeat itself, beginning in 2008, where the really big yacht business was, remained strong in Europe. Aviking and Rasmussen and Moonen and Royal Houseman Shipyard and all the yards that cater to the 1% of the 1%. Their business, that super yacht business, hung in there. And then at the very bottom end of the spectrum, there was activity, but it was the broad middle that took the hit. And just like in the Depression era, the boats between, I don't know what at the low end, but let's just say 20 to 80 feet or something like that is where, and that certainly doesn't, at the low end, maybe it's the middle class, but at the upper end, it certainly isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, in my view, anybody who can spend $400,000 for a Grady White is not in the middle class, but maybe my view is jaundiced.
Agreed, Jim.
I think the issue is driven way more by how much leisure time people have and how they're going to divide that time up than it is financial resources. And I think that applies to everybody all the way across from the 1% on down. That time that people can make available to enjoy boats, be they power boats or sailboats, but especially sailboats, because sailboats just take more time than power boats. I think that drives, that's going to drive customers in another 10 years in just the same way. I don't expect it to change from where it is now. And so I think that's a much bigger driver than ultimate cost, because there are plenty of boat options now across the spectrum of cost. And it's the ability to use those, to make good use of those boats enough time during a summer to justify it is what really drives it. And again, I don't think that part is going to change if we're going to appeal to to a broader spectrum, or get more people on the water, which is the conversation we had in the first panel more. I think it's more a boat sharing. It's more club ownership or community boating ownership of boats. That's what is going to drive things more. As designers, as David said, as designers, we are dealing with the 1%, and that's going to continue. That group now, although they didn't think they had the money in 2009, most of them do again now, and I think will in 10 years. But will they have enough time to justify the expense of what we do is the bigger question. That's kind of beyond what we can do.
The only caveat to that I would say would be that I think there was some view at one time that the really big yacht business was reinvigorated when people discovered that the communication technology was such that they could spend 2 weeks on their Fed ship in the Mediterranean and still be in daily touch with their offices, and that was a boost for the mega yacht business.
And another part that we've talked about is power versus sail. And one of the things that is a big advantage of the powerboat world is you can pull out of your slip or drop your mooring and go have fun for a couple hours and come back. And to get a sailboat underway, no matter what the size, no matter what kind of hardware you have, takes longer. And since we're talking about the fact that the available time is one of the biggest issues, that is one of the things that's tipped the balance.
So, John, the answer to your question is more leisure time is what's going to get people out of powerboats and back into sail.
28-hour day.
Unfortunately, we've run the clock pretty far down, and I was hoping to get back into the electric propulsion discussion we had with this crowd, but I want to open it up to questions from the floor. We're a little bit over, but if we take 10 minutes, and I'd certainly entertain questions about electric propulsion. Yes, right down front. Wait for the mic if you would. Thanks.
Well, I'll get into the electric propulsion thing, but I quickly want to tell a story. So we have a power cat, and we're here in the summer. We take it back to Connecticut in the end of August. So we're going back down, and we get into Long Island Sound, and all of a sudden my AIS starts popping boats up all over the place. Well, it was a vineyard race. We're doing 16 knots. The lead boats are coming by us going in the other direction at 24 knots. Well, I mean, all of a sudden I'm thinking we've been sailors all our lives. I'm dreaming about our next boat going back to sail, because with diesel electric, I mean, the costs are coming down dramatically because of the volumes in the automobile industry. And, you just need a little bit of push to get that apparent wind up with a catamaran, with modern sails. I mean, it's like a dream. I mean, it's and the reason hybrid cars are the right solution now is because the combination of an internal combustion engine and a small electric motor work perfectly well together. Well, I think the combination of a diesel electric power and modern sails on a modern catamaran just work perfectly together.
Any
Your
thoughts?
comments?
Well, the thought always runs through my mind every day that I'm awake is that sail is still the ultimate energy source, and that's never gone away. The problem is that how we define sail, and as an either-or situation, and we look at sail as the sole propulsion device, and sails rely on a combination of wind velocity and surface area. So if you want to be really versatile and go well in light air, you need more sail area. Then you got to figure out what to do when the wind picks up and get rid of the sail area. So we all know that. The combination solution, though, that you mentioned, I think is definitely a significant path if people could just clear their mind and start thinking again. That term motor sailor is not really used anymore. It used to be a big thing. A lot of motor sailors, but not anymore. It's just not a term we discuss. So diesel propulsion, hybrid systems, They're all getting more efficient. Why not use the wind? It's not costing you anything except the rig, and maybe, you know, if you simplify that and you're not worried about going upwind necessarily with this thing. You have a simple sail system that really relies more on the area and works maybe, you know, at fairly broad angles of sail, but when it's there, it's there. And your boat's easily driven, so you got 25 knots on the beam or behind you, and suddenly you're getting 6, 7, 8 knots out of that, plus a little bit of power on idle, and you're doing 15 knots. Fantastic, why not? I totally agree. It's just a matter of finding the right, probably the right sort of rig to do that. That isn't a pure sailboat rig with all its complexities. It's just got to be easier, you know, and supplement. But definitely.
Yeah, next.
Jim, 15 years from now, are we going to all have BSS oil?
Well, like I was saying, that approach, which is basically foil assist, is really effective on light race boats because you have to be able to physically lift the mass of the hull partway out of the water. And so in order to be worth the trouble, it needs to be a fairly light boat. So are we all going to have them? I doubt it, because it increases the cost, it increases the complexity, it takes a chunk out of the interior of useful interior space of the boat. But is it going to have broader application? Yeah. And is it a pretty cool development for a slice of the market in the sailing world? Yeah, it is. And will there be more? Sure, because people are going to keep on with the development work. They will get better. The application will get broader. But for a full-bodied cruiser, not for a while. No.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the future, I'm going to ask a question about sort of the end of boat lives. I've been in a lot of yards all the time, and recently I noticed just how much cleaner they are and how much better the air quality is and how much better actually the air they're putting out is and the toxicity of the products. But I haven't heard anybody really talk about where, particularly in the large vessel world that we work in a lot, where are these boats going?
The dead ones?
Dead super yachts.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe from the design side too, are there what measures do you take? Are you taking measures with that in mind, with end of life in mind?
Well,
currently?
aluminum boats are fully recyclable.
Well, and that's it
I got you all
becomes a
there.
material. The material question is certainly part
No
of it.
trees were killed.
One of the materials I've been involved more lately is wood, cold molded wood, and that's recyclable, renewable. It's a very small part. A lot of the older fiberglass boats, early fiberglass boats, will be here long after we are, and they'll have a useful life for a long time. They're not obviously at the forefront of design, but they will be there and maybe in use. But there is a whole middle range of fiberglass hulls that there has been work done in how to recycle the materials, but it's a pretty expensive source of materials at this point, as far as I know, which isn't too far. And is that part of what I designed to? No, it's really not. It's a bigger question than what we deal with day to day.
But doing cold molded wood helps.
Cold molded wood.
I'm sorry.
That's one of the many advantages of cold molded wood. That's one of them. It's a nice material, and it is recyclable and renewable.
Yeah, Peter, sorry.
Well, a large portion of the metal boats can be scrapped, of course, just as you scrap a big ship. So the steel boats that we do and the aluminum boats, which we do a lot of, we've probably done 50 to 60 aluminum pilot boats in the past 30 years, and only one of them is not still in service, and that was boat that came to an unfortunate end. But ultimately, some of them will be scrapped, and obviously there's things in them that are not recyclable, but the entire envelope and the internal structure is all, can all be recycled. That's not true for the glass boats, at least not at the moment.
Great. Next, yes, back here.
Yeah, okay, so oftentimes the builder and the designers are at cross purposes. And, and so how, everybody agrees in this room that we have to get simpler, easier to handle, everything. How do we control the customer together and apart?
Well, Cabot, some customers are not controllable. You know that as well as the rest of us do.
Care and handling of customers with and without the boat building.
Well, I think one of the things that can produce tension on all sides within a project is when expectations change during the project. So for a few years, we've been running a program where, before it used to be, we'd run a preliminary design of a vessel, and you would get enough of the vessel defined so that it could go to the boatyard where they could put a bid around it. And there's a specification document, and then if changes are made during the construction of that vessel, the specification document is referenced, change orders are issued. But if you front load the design process where you get to like 75, 80% of the design engineering of the boat, and it's really a mature design before it goes to the builder, then the builder knows what they're getting. And they can say, hey, this boat's crazy complex. I don't want anything to do with this, or okay, we can do this. And you've got buy-in. So it does require a bit of an initial investment from the client side. But in terms of the overall project timeline, it's not that big an investment because you never are faced with that situation where guys on the shop floor are waiting for plans because this design office has been given a 6-month lead start.
Yeah, I think a successful project is always a collaborative one, and communication between the client and designer and builder is absolutely critical. I've been either, I don't know if it's lucky or what, but I've not had those huge friction issues in projects that I can think of off the top of my head, and it is all about communication, as you say, preparation. Also, the preliminary plans have to suit the designer and are presented to a builder. Everybody knows what they're getting into ahead of time. Project management, keeping track of change orders and all is obviously key. So I don't think there are any huge secrets to it beyond the obvious of preparation ahead of time and communication all the way through, so everybody's on the same page.
And work with Jim if you can, because he doesn't have this problem. Tom.
I should preface my question by saying that I'm the senior editor of Wooden Boat magazine, so just to put you on alert, probably should have gone to the earlier group rather than the current one. But earlier today we saw Anna at the Lyman-Morse yard. A month or so ago, Drew took me through the boat, and I found the engineering part of that really fascinating. I'm wondering if you can comment on how the marriage of technologies, CAD design, CNC cutting, cold molding, vacuum bagging, have influenced the boat construction in that world, in the wooden boat world. And do you think we might see more of wooden? Is wood therefore more of a viable construction method in your world?
I guess the answer is yes, or at least all the production details that you mentioned are appropriately as applicable to, at least as applicable to wood construction as anything else. So if you're going to build a modern current day cold molded boat, do you start with with a 3D surface model of the hull and deck? Yes. And do the builders work from that, work directly from that 3D surface to interior pieces that can be assembled outside the boat and dropped in and fit, or have a whole deck built externally and dropped on and dropped on the deck, house dropped on the deck and expect it to fit, and all those details? Yes. Yes, your 3D modeling is applicable to the wooden boat end. Yes, your vacuum bagging is applicable and useful. Yes, post-curing of the epoxies in cold molded wood is applicable and appropriate. And so yeah, all that is useful, and yes, I think it makes modern wood construction more viable than it was, say, 10 years ago, and will probably continue in that direction. But yes, all of kind of modern boat building is applicable to the cold molding part, and works really well.
But in a way, the modeling element is common now to all design, regardless of material.
Yes.
And in a way, it reduces the relevance of the material in terms of build time, because it's reducing so much the need to any specific skill to the material or any particular handling requirements, because everything is so well defined. And but from our point of view and the design side, and I'm sure that the rest here would agree with me, it is the modeling time is the thing now. It takes up so much time in the design process because it's so laborious, and also obviously requires perfect precision. Because any fault in the modeling is going to be, an expensive. The thing comes back CNC cut and it doesn't fit. I mean, that doesn't happen, but when it does happen, guess who's responsible? It's kind of obvious who's responsible, So, and it's actually, in a funny way, this is kind of a little bit off subject, but kind of on subject. It's actually the amount of time it's adding to the gross hours involved in design, and we're crossing over into what would traditionally be the builder's territory.
Yes, right.
And I'm not. I mean, I find it a little bit difficult sometimes not justifying, but getting the appropriate design cost, because what I really want to do is say, the design's this, the modeling is the builder's problem. We're going to do it, but you put that in the build cost. We don't want to call in the design cost, because the design cost is an upfront cost. Everyone's going, it's the first check they're going to write. I want a boat. I need a design. How much? Whoa, I don't want to pay that much. So I can pay this much, and then Drew can pay me the rest when the boat gets
When we worked on paper, we'd make a drawing, and basically the message that the drawing contained was, build it so it looks like this.
Yeah.
But now we have a model, a 3D model, and the message is, build it exactly like this, And so there's no room for interpretation. And what you say is absolutely right. The modeling cost is enormous. The time is enormous.
Yeah, and really all we need to know is how thick the skin is, whether it's wood or composite or aluminum. That's just a part of the modeling, the solid modeling process. So the accuracy is inherent. But
so the good news is it's your control, and the bad news is it's your fault as well. I see there are more questions, but we're about 10 minutes over time, so I'm going to have to wrap up. But I will tell everyone, go to the hotel at 250 Main, carry on the conversation, ask the questions you want to ask. Thank you, Peter and Scott and Jim and David, and to Lyman-Morse for hosting this.